NBA playoffs, they're here, and we're going to be talking NBA playoff strategy. VR, the key here is what's different about regular season and NBA playoffs.
Bottom line, I think there's more value for the sharper bettor in the NBA playoffs.
Now, why is that?
Reason being, we're about to get infiltrated and saturated by more unsavvy and unsophisticated bettors. And anytime that happens in any marketplace, it produces more value for more sharper bettors. It happened, I believe, in March, and I spoke about it, saying how I increased my positions based on the fact I have an increased edge. And I feel that exact same way when it comes to NBA playoffs. I think my edge is increased, therefore I'm not afraid to step up and increase my positions as well.
Okay, so it's funny, when I was coming up and starting to meet a lot of people in the late 90s, let's say, there was always the debate, was the line created to split the result, or was the line created to split the action? And someone said something to me once, and it was like an epiphany. They said, the line is always created to split the action. All right, I've never told you this, so follow me. It's always created to split the action, but based on who's betting, the splitting of the action can sometimes be very close, if not identical, to the splitting of the results, or it can be far from it. So let's look in the Super Bowl.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Right, the most public game of all, the different splitting the action might be a number very different than splitting the result. But if you were booking only 5 guys and they were the 5 smartest guys in the country on that sport, now while you're booking them, maybe you think you're the smartest, right? And you're getting 110. You would make the line identical to split the action and the result, figuring there is no difference between their action and the projected result because they're so sharp. So with that, so now we're having this repetitive conversation, which is every time we enter a season that gets more public, is you're saying the opportunity presents itself more to make more money, and I would agree because the difference between splitting the result and splitting the action widens during this period.
Significantly. And books know, odds makers know that their clients, being the bookmakers, are going to be able to get more balance by putting out a number that's going to split the action as opposed to split the result. Meaning they might get a bunch of action on one side, a ton of public money on one side, but knowing that number's not there to create balance in the result, wise guys are going to come in on the other side and create a balance. So now all of a sudden you could sit back and collect that VIG. So you're not as exposed by putting out a number that's going to split the action.
Okay, so what you're saying is when it was just wise guys, then, or let's say less of the public involved, then the bookmaker is going to put out a line tailored for the wise guys.
Exactly. And total in college basketball, total for a smaller conference.
That's going to be tailored strictly for wise guys.
Correct.
So now if you're able to beat that, it means you know more than the odds maker. If you're able to beat something like the Super Bowl, it means you know more than the public. It's easier to know more than the public than it is to know more than the odds maker. Though some people do know more than the odds maker, and they'll pound the crap out of those college totals, but it's a lot easier to, in my opinion, to say, hey, the public overvalues the Lakers, I'm going to go against the Lakers.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why I stick by that. There's times during the year that your edge increases. It's like anything else.
But it's directly correlated with the involvement of the public.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And the fact is that right now with the NBA playoffs, our market's about to get saturated with unsavvy bettors. It's on every night. It's on prime time. And guys want to get down. And that's the bottom line. Right now is the best time, I think, for sharp bettors to get an edge over the marketplace.
Okay, so that increases my enthusiasm and the general enthusiasm for the NBA playoffs. And I agree, I found it to be one of the most profitable times of the year. Why don't you tell me specifically on a handicapping level what you're looking at differently?
Okay, bottom line, you're going to hear a lot about zigzag theories and all this stuff that's worked for years in the NBA. Bottom line is today, it's not like odds makers haven't caught on. Yes, there's new bettors entering the marketplace year in and year out that don't know about these things. But now with the internet, information's so readily available, it's no secret that the betting public knows about the zigzag theory and, looks to follow it at times.
And that's funny. The key point, though, just to clarify something. You said, the odds makers, they've caught on, but really that doesn't matter.
has the
betting
public,
caught on.
the marketplace caught on, and I think they have because
Sure.
it's
For
funny.
years. I think it's been years.
Early on, you're going to see all these posts all over the place. Zigzag works again, and you're going to see it the first week. But 2-3 weeks into the NBA playoffs, those bloggers, they stop writing about it because it starts to get balanced. You know, I think it's one of those things that if it happens to work the first week of the NBA playoffs, all of a sudden see the zigzag still working. But as it progresses, I don't think it does. Here's what I'm looking for.
And this is something, you're doing a podcast with me on Friday, and that's available, all those, including this one on pregamepodcast.com, let's talk about the zigzag because it's probably a 15-minute conversation.
Sure.
But really what it's saying is, in the simplest sense, is that when a team needs to win, they win in the playoffs. And that historically has happened more than people expected. In the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, everyone caught on to it, and now the lines are skewed in a way, maybe it's 1.5 points extra to that side, that it went from 57% to 51% because of the adjustment.
Correct.
And we'll talk about that concept. All right, so other than zigzag.
Here's the bottom line. I think this is the most important concept and the one concept that I use year in and year out in the NBA playoffs. I look for adjustments. This is where all my starting of handicapping the matchup comes from. I look for the line adjustment on the side or the total. Here's what's going to happen from game 1 to game 2, game 2 to game 3, and onward. The odds maker is going to adjust the line. The key is trying to determine, is that line adjustment justified? Or is that just based on the fact that the betting public has a short-term memory and overreacts to what they just saw? And I think that's where the sharp bettors like myself find the most value, by being able to find those adjustments that aren't justified. And now someone may say that, okay, that falls into the zigzag theory. I don't think it does, because you're not necessarily going against one team just because they lost the day before. I'm talking about
if anything, sometimes it's the opposite.
Exactly. And that's the one of the key concepts I look for. I'm looking for those games where the line has been adjusted after one game. A lot of times you'll see the exact same line for game 1 and game 2. Team's an 8-point favorite. It might be 8.5 in game 2 because they covered it. No big adjustment. But there are times that because the final score, the result, is so, further from the mean, that point spread that we call the mean, that the odds maker is going to over-adjust and overcompensate for that. And I think that's where you could most take advantage of this market.
It's interesting because on one hand, the zigzag is saying fade the team that just did well in some spots, not all spots. And the human square, the typical square reaction, the human reaction is to if a team just won by 20, they want to bet them again against the same team the next day. So it's interesting, and you make a great point, is how the zigzag is pushing you one way sometimes, and the human reaction about overcompensation for what they most recently saw are pushing you the other way, and sometimes they overlap in a way that offers great value.
I couldn't agree more. And another thing I always do, and this goes to what I do weekly with my value top 10, and I do this going into the playoffs. Before they begin, I'm going to already have isolated teams that I think going in are overvalued, going in are undervalued. With that said, I'm not going to ride or fade these teams on every occasion, nor am I never going to bet an overvalued team or fade an undervalued team, because each situation sometimes, it dictates what I'm going to do. And so does the line, what the odds maker is going to put out there. A team may be going in overvalued, but like I said, but the betting public has a short-term memory and they overreact. And because of that, a team that may be overvalued game 1 may be the undervalued team in game 2.
But that's the thing. Let's say that there's two buckets of factors in a game. One is the general perception of the two teams by the public. And number 2 is, what are the circumstances of this game? Travel, most recent game, all the circumstances that you handicap, those are 2 separate factors. And that unless no team is going to be undervalued or overvalued so much that you can blindly play them every time or blindly fade them every time. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that let's say that the overvaluation is 1 point for the Celtics. Now, if the Magic, and I talked about this today on a podcast, I'll make it quick, but this is such a key point. If the Magic number of points you need is 2.5, okay? So now to go, if you're getting 1 because you have an undervalued team to start with, to get to 2.5 only takes 1.5 additional points of value
Right.
based on the circumstances of the game. But if you're looking towards playing a team that is 1 point overvalued,
correct.
now you've got to go 3.5 points.
That's the key. You have to have a lot of support, a lot of reasons to take a team that's overvalued. And that's what I always talk about on Twitter. I'm not saying this team's going to lose. What I am saying is you need to know going in, you're getting the worst of it. So if you're going to back them, you need to make sure you have a lot of support. It's like saying
More than double the support you need
exactly
for backing.
And we discussed this yesterday on Twitter. I talk about it all the time, Twitter. But it's funny. Someone said, would you lay big favorites, big chalks? And my response was, I'll lay a -600 if I know the true odds are -750. But if you're going to get into the business of laying 600, you got to be pretty damn sure, that
And this is what, there was a guy on the forums playing a lot of big money lines, and a lot of people said, oh, this is idiotic. And my point was, I agree, it's less likely to find value laying 700, but there's still value to be found.
I couldn't agree more.
And then other forum members said, and I think they were right, money management gets a lot more sophisticated when it comes to
laying chalk like
laying
that.
chalk like that. And I think they're right about that, too.
I agree.
Any closing thoughts?
Just the final thing I wanted to stress is in the playoffs, just like any other game, the spread is the great equalizer. You don't have to like a team to win the series. You don't have to love a team to beat the other team. There are going to be dogs that cover the spread. There will be great teams that may sweep and go 0-4 ATS in that sweep. So don't necessarily back those great teams because the spread is always the great equalizer, and I think it's never more important than in high-profile matchups like the playoffs.
Awesome. You've done so well. I'm going to let you give your Twitter to the audience.
Vegas Runner. Twitter.com/Vegas Runner. One word, baby.
You've been doing some good stuff there.
Love it. Love it. On there as much time as I possibly can.
Okay, guys, we're going to continue on and break down some individual games in the NBA playoffs. We'll talk to you then.